Good morning. To the South Mountain Freeway, the final product presentation. You will hear from three gentlemen today who lived this. Steve Micheler, the ADOT design manager for ADOT's major project team and for the South Mountain 202 freeway project. Steve has spent most of his 21-year career at ADOT in roadway design. Steve moved to the Tucson district in 2012, where he served as a department engineer and manager for district permits. Steve received his Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering at Purdue University. Next, we have Zach Davis. Zach's role on the South Mountain Freeway is the Pecos segment manager for ADOT. He and his team provided owner verification and oversight and development and independent quality firm on the Pecos segment of the project. Zach ensures that contract compliance from construction perspective is done. Zach graduated from NAU in 2010 with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and has been with ADOT for about 7 years. And finally, we have Doug Lamont. He's the Connect 202 Partners Design Manager. Doug Lamont is the Vice President and Senior Project Manager for WSP and serves as the Connect 202 Partner Design Manager for the State Route 202 Loop South Mountain Freeway P3 program. Doug has spent his entire 30-year career on the delivery of ADOT projects and has worked on both the contractor side and the owner side of design build projects. Take it away, fellas.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the South Mountain Freeway project. We will walk you through the final product. Next slide. This morning we'll give you a project overview, introduce you to the project team, go through some of the design and construction fun facts, walk you through lessons learned, give a brief discussion on maintenance, and then wrap it up with final summary. Next slide. As you're aware, this is Arizona's largest roadway project in Arizona history at $1.77 billion. This project was publicly financed with a 40-60 split, 40% federal funding and 60% Prop 400 funds, and it was open to traffic December 2019. Next slide. As you're aware, the project was broken into 4 segments: the Pecos segment, Center segment, Salt River segment, and the I-10 Papago segment. That also included a 4.5-mile section of widening on I-10 between 75th and 43rd Avenue. There were 41 bridges and 1 pedestrian bridge. We had 5 multi-use undercrossings, 11 miles of sound wall. We had 2 half diverging diamond interchanges and 1 double roundabout interchange. There were 15 interchanges, and there was a 6-mile long segment of shared use path. By using the P3 model, we were able to save over $100 million and open the project 3 years sooner. Next slide. The project was 4 lanes in each direction, 3 general purpose lanes and 1 HOV lane. Next slide. Now I'll introduce you to the project team. I think the first thing that surprised the developer was ADOT did actually meet all of our procurement dates. The general engineering consultant was HDR and several sub-consultants. The general engineering consultant performed all the reviews day to day for the plans. They were also co-located with the Connect 202 partners with ADOT and the developer. Our average review time for the plans was 8.75 days. During the peak, we had 15 plan review staff for 7 disciplines. Next slide. Now I'll hand it over to Doug.
The Connect 202 Partners team was a construction joint venture made up of Fluor, Granite, and Ames, and they established themselves in 2014. After they got themselves established, they hired 4 key areas: an independent quality firm, public involvement firm, right-of-way firm, and then the lead engineer being WSP. Some of the other considerations that they went through during the establishment of their team were some of the key folks that had bounty dollar values on them in the pursuit. The Connect 202 partners, what I really wanted to point out with this slide is there was 118 professional services subcontractors, and this particular project had a rather large disadvantaged business enterprise goal of 10.93% for construction. At the conclusion of the project, we made an 11%, so the goal was met. The design team was made up of WSP. We were the lead design firm, and during the pursuit phase and in the final design, in the pursuit phase, we had 5 major subs that formed the team through that part. So we had Stanley Consultants, Aztec Engineering, Corel Design Group, the Transtech Group, and then Wood. Once we won the project, we had set up contracts with 30 different sub-consultants. So we had some fun managing our entire team. The professional services goal for the DBE was 16.5%, a pretty large percentage, and I'm proud to say that we were able to get a 16.75%. That was the actual. During the heavy lift, during this design phase, we were running at 175 staff for a period of 4 or 5 months continual. And when you have that many staff, you have to communicate with them, and you have to do it via, we had design leads meetings every week. We had scheduled email blasts every week. Steve and I and the GEC project manager and our design manager for the contractor side met on a regular basis. In fact, I think Steve's name tag was actually in my office at one point because he was in the office quite often. Being engineer types, we love numbers. So I got a slide here that has more numbers on it than you can probably care about, but there's a couple I want to point out. We had nearly 7,000 as-built plan sheets, a tremendous amount of sheets over the 22 miles of construction, 165 RFC packages. Construction, we had 2,300 plus our requests for information. And on this job, and what we've seen on what we've done on some of the other design build jobs, we had notice of design changes and field design changes. We decided to minimize the paperwork and just make all design changes or construction changes in the field NDCs, and we had over 2,700 of them. The general engineering consultant used eBuilder as a document control system for their information and for ADOT's information. And you can just see by reading the number of gigabytes used, just a big system. One thing I want to point out, we had 300 submittals per month during the peak period. So eBuilder was quite busy and active. Steve?
Okay, now I'll walk you through the third-party approvals. Next slide. This project was a little different. We required the developer and designer to get third-party approvals with the city of Phoenix, the county, and also the Gila River Indian community. So a few examples of that were the 32nd Street traffic interchange. That was originally part of the DCR, and after a focus group decided to remove that. However, after the lawsuit, that community came to us and said, we want that TI. So we added that back into the project with coordination with MAG. Next was the Elwood Pedestrian Bridge, which you can see on the photo to the right. Also, we had the 40th Street Cottonwood traffic signal that's right outside the parking right there. As you can imagine, a 22-mile project has a lot of development and activity going on once the freeway started construction, and they were all trying to get open before or just after we opened. So a lot of coordination with the developer there. We had the shared use path along the Pecos segment, and then a lot of coordination with the bicycle community and still ongoing communication. Next slide. Also the Gila River Indian community, obviously they're to the south and to the west throughout through the project. So they, after the lawsuit as well, came to us and had some concerns on the proximity of the traffic interchange at Estrella. And so we coordinated with them and added this Vicuiva traffic interchange. And also we had 404 permit. Obviously, they had concerns with the drainage coming off the South Mountain and then coming under the roadway. So we had special requirements to coordinate with the Corps and them. Using Flow 2D modeling that they're more familiar with. We had the 40th Street improvements to the south where we tied in. This project was a little different. We had we ended up selling our spare conduit on the south and the west portion of the freeway and we sold that to the Gila River Telecom, or Alluvion, and they're in the process of pulling two 288 strands of fiber through there, and ultimately end up selling that to adjacent businesses, which will be great. Next slide. So as we're in the process of adding the Bequiva traffic interchange, Ivanhoe at the time, there was concerns with the community that lives right there off of Ivanhoe. So as we're working with them and Meg and the county, they had concerns and didn't want that connectivity. So ultimately we ended up walling off that entire thing and adding a frontage road. And then on the right photo, you can see a concrete bridge off in the distance. That's the Ray Road undercrossing, and they have to go back to 51st Ave and either can double back to Bequiva or get onto Estrella. Next slide. Some other additional project features. When I was in heavy communications with the DPS, right where Doug's hand's moving, there's a node building there right off of 17th Ave. DPS had some challenges with radio communication. So what we did is they were able to get some funding to add a 100-foot monotube tower there. And that'll provide not only communications for them through the Pecos segment and through the Rock Cut, but also for local fire and police and ADOT as well. On the right photo is 32nd Street, and that's where the traffic interchange was added. That's currently under construction and should be finished up here in the next month or so. Next slide. As you can imagine, a 22-mile corridor, 4.5 miles on I-10. There's a lot of utilities. This was a little different. It was developer-led, and by this we mean Big D developer for City of Phoenix, which basically treats them, instead of an ADOT contractor, they're more like Target or Walmart. So that provided some extra opportunities for Doug to work through with his team. Lots of city and water sewer permits, easement widths we had to work through, land rights, and then of course we had several 230 kV and 500 kV power corridors to coordinate with. Just some brief statistics here. Over 2,300 conflict locations of utilities, 18 utility companies, and 215 utility permits. You can see there's quite a number of City of Phoenix water and sewer permits. One of the developers' bigger challenges was when they relocated the water line down Liberty Lane for 8,000 feet, encountered a bunch of rock, but opportunity, they got through it. Next slide. SRP, we had over 300 conflicts, or I'm sorry, this is City of Phoenix. Over 300 conflicts, ended up relocating 4.1 miles of water and 1.7 miles of sewer. Of course, no project is complete without a railroad. Everyone needs a railroad for a little more fun. And we had the UPR here to work through. Next slide. So SRP, a lot of permits with SRP. We had 35 irrigation permits. We did have a segment through Baseline area that we had Peninsula Horowitz also, so we got to work with them and get that through. So between the SRP and Peninsula Horowitz irrigation, we had 6.8 miles of relocation. We had some challenges on our 8 irrigation crossings on I-10. Go figure, before I was born, they apparently didn't do the paperwork right. So we got to perfect that right-of-way crossings for all 8 of those. Transmission, we had 10 permits between SRP, APS, and WAPA. That was 6.1 miles relocated. The photo on the bottom right is just showing the Broadway shoe fly so that they could build the traffic interchange there. And we had 46 distribution permits. Next slide. So right-of-way acquisition, as you can imagine, it was just a massive undertaking. ADOT Department of Right-of-Way did an awesome job. So this parcel to the left is Dolphin. It was one of our critical parcels that took over 3 years to relocate them. They had over 600 pieces of equipment that we had to refabricate and relocate. There was a savings of $50 million total for right-of-way. There was an apartment complex on the west side that we bifurcated, and we split 2 apartment complexes in half. The developer had proposed that we combine the 2 and sell it. So that's ultimately what we did at $11.5 million, and we split that 50-50. ADOT retained parcels versus developer. This is the only time I've been aware that we've allowed the developer or required the developer to do all the right-of-way. So ADOT did it all the right-of-way before the handoff. At the handoff, we handed it over to the developer, and they were responsible for doing all the right-of-way relocations and all that. Next slide. Just some quick numbers on right-of-way parcels. We had over 1,400 right-of-way parcels. Total relocations was nearly 1,700. Total right-of-way cost was approximately $644 million, and for resale we have approximately 500 acres. Next slide. Now I'll hand it over to Doug.
On the environmental side, that photo on the right is one of 120 chuck walls that were relocated as a part before the construction started. The environmental document was completed at the time we won the project. But as the old saying goes, the devil's in the details. As you get into the final design and you start looking at the details required with temporary construction easements, drainage easements, right-of-way easements for working, you end up having to do a little bit more than what was in the environmental document. So there was 11 reevaluations, 6 memorandums to files, and 81 categorical exclusions. On the roadway side of it, we had some fun early on in the very first fall that we started the project, and we initiated an early work package, and that gave us an opportunity to practice, which we were able to use as we've developed the other ready for RFC, release for construction packages. That was quite an undertaking. It was the first time that the team got to work together through this, getting all of the necessary documents together in order to get RFC'd. One little fact is 13 million cubic yards of earthwork, which fills the Phoenix Cardinals Stadium 13 times. So tremendous, just a large amount of earthwork. On the bridges, this project was performance-based specs. So we were able to do some things that some other design build projects aren't able to do. We were able to, for example, bring for the first time in ADOT's history, the bulb T girders to Arizona. So we used bulb T girders, precast deck panels. We also used a different approach on the bridge, the way we did the bridges. We did a template sheet approach. So for those of us that have done ADOT projects, you recognize that each bridge package stands alone, and you repeat a lot of sheets, get repeated over and over and over again. So we did this template approach whereby we created a standard set of details, and we would just refer to them as a part of building the project, and that allowed us not to have so many multiple sheets of the same sheet, that has a tendency to introduce error. The picture on the left is the Salt River Bridge being constructed. There's over 25 miles of girders, 9 miles of girders just on the Salt River bridges alone, and 6.2 miles of drilled shafts on the project. Retaining and sewn walls. We had some fun with these at the beginning of the project. What you see on the left side is the abutment piers, and what you also see is a retaining wall that goes either around it, in front of it, or on the side where that vehicle is driving, or behind it. We had some very fun conversations with ADOT and the GEC as to the best place to put these for, number one, ease of construction, number two, maintenance, and number three, aesthetics. So we worked out a deal where several of these ended up walls in front of the abutments, and some of them were behind the abutments. There was over 8 miles of retaining walls and 1.2 million square feet of retaining wall or sound walls. Steve mentioned earlier, as a part of the special, the 404 permit, there was a special condition in there that said we were to do a Flow 2D model to demonstrate that what we have for our project was compatible with the water as it would go across the freeway and onto the Gila River Indian community. So we had regularly scheduled meetings with the Gila River Indian community, and we produced a Flow 2D model that ultimately was approved and allowed the contractor to go out and start building. Also, as a part of the project, the contractor maximized the use of precast elements. So what you see on the left-hand side are precast boxes. They use those to allow the construction to go faster. As soon as they could get the environmental permit, we were able to construct using these, and it sped up construction. Pavement. There was a lot of debate on the pavement. This is the first Phoenix Urban Freeway to use asphaltic concrete pavement. So the main line and the ramps are all asphaltic concrete. Crossroads are our traditional PCCP. Contractor was debated back and forth during the time of estimating, and when you start taking into the maintenance side of this thing, the asphaltic concrete pavement penciled out. So that's what we went with. Lot of quantity, almost a million tons of asphaltic pavement. We do have some PCCP as well. We were prescriptive on the up on I-10 on the north end of the project, where we were to match the existing reinforced concrete pavement. So we had almost 500 tons of that, 500,000 tons of that. Zach?
So one of the first things we did as we started this project was actually some of the landscape, which is a little bit backwards from what we'd normally have to do. We ended up salvaging over 1,000 plus cactus, barrel cactus, sorrel cactus, palo verde trees, ironwood trees, and things like that. We had to side box them, bottom box them after 3 weeks, put them in a temporary nursery, and then they sat in that temporary nursery for almost 3 years until we were able to get to the landscape portion of the actual project. Next slide. So just some of the fun facts: we had 298 subcontractors, over 1,100 construction subcontractors on the project, 6.2 million man hours worked uninjured, which is something we're very proud of. We had about 450,000 tons of center segment swelling, and we had about 250 plus blasts in the center segment and Payco segment. We had a video we were going to show you, but we figured you wouldn't be too interested in talking to us after that, so we didn't end up showing that. Next slide. So just some of the things through construction. One of the traditional approaches you'd use in a traditional ADOT project is a QA/QC process. The contractor provides all the quality control, ADOT provides all the quality acceptance. Next slide. In this particular project, we used an IQF firm, so that was a QA/QC OV process, quality control, quality acceptance, and then owner verification. So what was different about that was IQF, and they were an independent inspector on this. They performed all the acceptance. They had the Cqmp, that was the construction quality management program, and different roles in that. So the contractor role stayed the same with quality control. ADOT role takes a step back. IQF performs all the acceptance. Next slide. So this is the Cqmp, some of the activities that they use, the construction quality management plan. This is the manual that the developer and IQF use to dictate their work and daily activities. They revised it as needed throughout the project. And basically, it just contains the instructions and forms for virtually any and all activities that were performed on the project. If you can see on your screen on the right side, there's just a list of all the activities that they might come across as they went through this project. So this defined all the on-site inspection and off-site inspection. It basically just defines the roles and responsibilities of the quality team members, developer, IQF, etc. It just assists in all the parties in minimizing and resolving the deficient work. Next slide. So the quality assurance program that we used on this project, as I said before, quality control was the developer, IQF was quality acceptance, ADOT performed owner verification, and some of the independent acceptance. So quality control basically just highlights the quality planning, material quality preparation, and workmanship. Quality acceptance is the planned and systematic process performed jointly by IQF and by ADOT. And owner verification are the activities that were performed by ADOT or our consultants, GEC, to validate the results that we got through the quality control process. So that's the process we use as a whole. Next slide. Some of the roles and responsibilities that IQF had to do was just perform all the quality acceptance testing, inspection, and sampling across the entire corridor. So that was 22 miles. To do this, they used a series of hold points. So if you had like a concrete pour, we just wouldn't allow the developer to go past, wouldn't allow the developer to begin pouring until IQF had come to that spot, made sure all the rebar was in place, made sure all the grade was at where it needed to be, so on and so forth, and then they could begin the pour. Some of the other roles that IQF performed was documentation. and then just the various continuous, periodic, and frequent inspection of the activities as a whole. So continuous meaning like a concrete pour, they'd be there throughout the entire activity. Periodic might be something they would check in day to day, throughout the day, and then frequent maybe once a day, something so on and so forth. Next slide. So as owner verification, the picture on the right is just kind of what we use for the materials verification. In terms of actual construction inspection, we had a lot of different other activities, but for sampling specifically, we would sample approximately 10%, but not less than 5% for a level 1. We also had level 2, which we just sample once per quarter, and a level 3, where it was either no testing performed or we would just use the observation of the test performance. So a level 1 would be like densities, concrete, things like that, and then so on. As we considered them less important, we would move into the level 2 or level 3. Next slide. Some of the other documentation that IQF used, they were going throughout this, was the deficiency notice and the nonconformance report. The deficiency was just any work product or process that wasn't in conformance with the contract, but that could be corrected by reworking it like that day, basically. Just something that you noticed on the fly. They can come, hey, you missed this, come back, come fix it. A nonconformance report was if it was a failure to fulfill a contractual requirement related to a work product, maybe it didn't match the plan, something that you'd already put in place, didn't match the plans, and it would need an engineer's buy-off to fix it later on. So that was the IQF's job, to document these and then bring them through and have everybody talk about them and move on. Next slide. Just some of the difficulties and strengths that we had on this project. It was 3 entities that would never work together and had to come together and work on a brand new project for ADOT. It was a new ADOT contract type. It was something we'd never done before. That provided a lot of opportunity for relationships and a lot of things for relationships to either go wrong or to go very right, and just something that was difficult to work through the whole time. Everybody had to be flexible. ADOT had a new contract style that they weren't used to. The developer had to get used to the ADOT style of management and specifications, and the IQF had to walk that fence line in between the contractor and the owner. In addition to just a myriad of 404 delays and issues that we had in the center segment early on. Next slide. Some other struggles that we had, just defining the roles. ADOT had a segment manager, IQF kind of had a segment manager. The developer broke it down into different field engineers. So they had various silos for the field, bridge field engineers, drainage field engineers, MOT, things like that. So there was a lot of communication that had to happen with everybody to kind of work together and to keep moving forward. And then you're going to hear me say the word communication about 50 more times throughout this slide. Communication is one of the first things that breaks down in the field and one of the first things that needs to be fixed in order to have a successful project. So, and just like I said, we're going to hear that a lot. And then also scheduling. 3 entities, the developer has to get the job done, IQF has to be there to test it, and then owner verification has to make sure that everything validates. So it's just a lot of work with that. Next slide. Some of the things that went well eventually was field communication. My inspectors took a while to learn that, hey, we can't go talk to the developer now, we need to talk to IQF first. But I think eventually that relationship really worked well. Everybody kind of figured out what they needed to do, at least on the PACO segment, which is where I was over. Relationships, I think we had a good relationship with IQF. We had a good relationship with our opposing segment managers, and all stuff that we had to work on, but it was all stuff that came out strong at the end. And then partnering. We had a lot of executive partnerings. We had a lot of field partnerings. This picture shows you one of the ones that we had. Design innovations, the DDIs, the shared use paths, and bold T girders, a lot of that things went really well. And then public outreach. I was on the PACO segment where we had the blasting. We were right through people's backyards and neighborhoods. There was a lot of, say, discontent with this portion of the project, and the communications team just worked extremely hard to get a lot of that out there. And then the role of counterparts, just the relationships with those went well, in addition to the responsibilities everybody had. Next slide. What went well specifically for me, I didn't start this project in a management role. I was more of a project supervisor out in the field, but I was able to have the opportunity to be on it from the cradle to the grave, and I was able to work with my RE at the time, and we were able to handpick our team. We have got what we consider to have the best inspectors, and it just really helped make this portion of that project go smoothly for me. I had a lot of strong mentors and leaders. I mean, with Julie Gadsby and James Hartman and Rob Samore, I mean, there was a lot of strong leadership that I could look to and ask questions to. In addition to the strong support staff, the GEC with HDR and everything was just hugely helpful. And then, of course, my own ADOT staff. So I just can't thank everybody enough for making this a successful project. Next slide. Some of the areas of improvement that we need to have is just the roles for IQF. I think there was some concern early on with ADOT, what we wrote in the contract and how they read it, and just things like survey, MOT, all things that we're going to fix moving forward to the Broadway curve. This is new to ADOT, so obviously that'll get better as we learn and move forward. ADOT's used to being under the ground for the entire spec construction, so it was different for us to kind of take that step back and not just be such an active part of the process. That was very difficult. And then the periodic versus continuous. ADOT always is continuous inspection. IQF had periodic, caused a little bit of heartburn early on. Next slide. IQF's role in enforcement versus documentation. I think ADOT expected them to be able to enforce a little bit more and maybe didn't write that into the contract the way we felt like we should have, and it's something that we're also going to be working on going forward. And then just plan sheets. There were 3 different softwares with this. The developer had their software, ADOT had their software, IQF had their software. Everybody had to come together. And sometimes we weren't getting plan sheets until 5 minutes before that activity. And to make sure that all 3 entities were on the same page was a big deal. And then just scheduling. It was a huge project, just trying to make sure everybody knows where to go at any given time. And then, you know, IQF, developer, ADOT, just getting everybody on the same page. Some lessons learned on the next slide. Survey as-built. We think it'd be important to make sure that you're surveying everything in as you go. It's pretty tough through this large of a corridor to get everything surveyed after the fact, so it's just something you need to work on continuously throughout the project. ADOT had some issues early on where they felt like IQF might be taken advantage of and being used as quality control. I think all out of that got worked through, but it was just something that we need to pay attention to moving forward. And then just getting used to the hold points. Can you move past the hold point if it doesn't pass? What do you do if it does, if it doesn't pass, and things like that. And then just allowing IQF to have a little bit more teeth to make those field decisions as we move through. Next slide. Accurate scheduling, design reviews, RFI tracking, roles and relationships, all stuff we've talked about, all stuff that makes sense. As Doug said earlier, 2,300 RFIs, just to make difficult to make sure all of that gets trickled down to the field. Next slide. Survey, something moving forward with Broadway curve, their roles and responsibilities, and partnering. Communication, partnering is huge on a project of this size. I cannot emphasize that enough. Next slide. Some of the Corona impacts that we had on this project, I know everybody's been kind of dealing with that, but just some of the things that we dealt with, we pretty much immediately switched to virtual meetings. Some of the developers' crews went down in some inopportune times, and obviously that affected some lead times and other things like that. So there's still some negotiations going on with the final acceptance and things like that, and we'll kind of be moving through those as time goes on. Steve?
All right. What went well on the design side? The co-location office size, I think, went well. Obviously, we had 175 staff, as Doug mentioned, so we didn't have room for all them. So we had the leads and was able to go down and address any concerns I had. Change order work, we learned real quickly that we needed to separate the design out from the construction. That's typical. Executive partner meetings, those were held quarterly. We had open and honest dialogue. I think we have a photo of one there. No, just kidding. And then the weekly design manager meetings that Doug mentioned went really well. Next slide. Live Bluebeam sessions. I know Doug and the designer and developer used live Bluebeam sessions, and that went well. For us, my favorite was the KMZs. Basically, the design was draped over a Google Earth, and we got updates every Friday, so we were able to see those changes as they were happening. Limit to the review packages to 10 per discipline. That just helped keep the GEC team lean, and obviously if we're having 300 submittals a month, that was quite a bit to keep up with. Use of performance-based specs, I think that went really well. Rob wanted to open up the innovation valve, and I think we did. We brought in some new structural features that are being used around the country. Next slide. Areas of improvement. Consistency of team from pursuit to construction, that's always key. Having that transfer of knowledge. Onboarding of key staff for constructability reviews. I know some of the construction folks were at other projects around the country, but getting them on early to do those constructability reviews is really helpful. Regular group utility meetings. And just understanding of the designer of third-party design deliverables and what the city and county and Gila River Indian community are looking for. Next slide. Some of the things that we're going to be we've implemented on the Broadway curve: bounty of more key personnel, address ambiguous terms in the technical provisions like future compatibility and accommodate, two of my least favorite words. Those cost a couple $1 million. Labor shortages and price increases, just understanding, you know, you have a product for 4 years long, how to deal with those challenges and risk, which I think the developer did well. IQF authority and scope of work, and PE on site. Zach already addressed those. Next slide. I'll hand it back to Zach.
So just the schedules we went through, it opened to traffic. On main line opened to traffic December 21st, 2019. We received substantial completion March 27th, 2020, which began a portion of the 30-year maintenance. The additional TIs, VQuiva TI was completed in July of 2020. 32nd Street TI and the Shared East Pathway will be complete in October of 2020. And then, as I stated earlier, we're kind of working through the final completion dates with corona impacts and things like that. So we're shooting hopefully sometime in November 2020.
What you see here are just some side-by-side photos. September of 2016, based in July 2020. We just took a few snapshots of various locations along the project. You can just quickly go through them. We needed to take this one. We actually had water in the Salt River, so we needed to get that photo in there. And then the system interchange on I-10.
Okay, now briefly on the maintenance. So why was 30 years chosen? Back in 2014, 13, when Rob was looking at it, there were already contracts, maintenance contracts for 20 and 25 years. What we were really looking for was to be able to have two 15-year maintenance cycles of the friction course, and allowed us to have a sign replacement at year 20. Next slide. This just kind of goes through, at the end of the 30 years, there's a remaining useful life or handback period. And as you can see, for pavement, that's 10 years. And for bridges and walls, that's 40 years. Next slide. So journey of our, kind of a summary of our journey. The project inception began back in 1983. We had 14 years to complete, it took 14 years to complete the federal EIS. There was two sales tax, Proposition 300 and 400. We successfully endured two lawsuits. We had two unsolicited proposals. The last one gave us the idea of doing one large design, build, maintain P3 project. The P3 law took place in July of 2009. This was Arizona's first transportation design, build, maintain, and we opened to traffic on December 21st, 2019. Next slide. Now we'll open it up for any questions you guys may have. I think this is when I looked for the chat, but also there's a couple different awards coming up. We've got the site there if you would like to vote for the project, and you get extra credit for your participation today. No, I'm just kidding. I'm looking up the chat, but
I'm not seeing anything yet.
I don't see anything yet. I guess there's no questions.
Good, all the better.
All right.
So with no questions, I want to thank everybody for taking the time and listening to the presentation. And I wish we were live. It's a little bit different than being live in Tucson. So maybe next year we'll be able to do something live. So with that said, unless a question comes in, this will be the end of this session, and we'll just, I think it times out all by itself. So thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of the day.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.